Forget Lourdes for a moment. Set Guadeloupe aside. There the messages were private. A peasant girl, a humble indigenous man. Sacred encounters often doubted because only select individuals could witness them. But what happens when heaven refuses to whisper anymore? What happens when a celestial visitation does not unfold in a secluded grotto, but over the rooftops of an entire village visible for miles? And most importantly, what happens when the observers are not merely devout pilgrims, but thousands upon thousands of ordinary people, farmers, shopkeepers, government officials, medical doctors, journalists with cameras, and military personnel all witnessing the same phenomenon simultaneously? We are in Syria. We are in Lebanon. We are in Egypt again, but this time in different locations across the Middle East. The years span from 2004 to present day. Mobile phones are recording. Digital cameras are capturing. News agencies are investigating. And there, appearing in churches, over homes, in the sky itself, radiating an otherworldly brilliance, is a feminine figure clothed in celestial light. This is the story of the recent Marian apparitions across the Middle East, events that continue to unfold, witnessed by hundreds of thousands, documented by modern technology, and largely unknown to the Western world. Today we will examine every verified detail of these extraordinary occurrences that are transforming the spiritual landscape of the most troubled region on Earth. The context of suffering. To comprehend these apparitions, we must first understand the crucible of pain from which they emerge. The Middle East in the 21st century has become synonymous with warfare, persecution, and displacement. Ancient Christian communities, some tracing their roots to the apostles themselves, face extinction. ISIS swept through Iraq and Syria, crucifying believers, burning churches, selling children into slavery. In Egypt, Coptic Christians endure regular terrorist attacks on their churches during prayer services. Bombs explode during Palm Sunday celebrations. Buses carrying pilgrims are ambushed and massacred. Entire villages are emptied as families flee for their lives. The faithful of the Middle East do not practice Christianity in comfortable suburban churches with coffee bars and parking attendants. They practice it under the shadow of death. Every Sunday service could be their last. Every gathering risks becoming a funeral. Into this darkness, into this valley of tears where ancient Christianity faces potential annihilation, heaven has responded, not with thunder and judgment, but with a mother's presence. The apparitions have occurred precisely in the areas of greatest suffering, as if Mary herself has come to stand with her persecuted children, to tell them without words that they are not abandoned, that their tears are seen, that their blood cries out and is heard. Qamishli, Syria, 2004. The first major wave. The city of Qamishli sits in northeastern Syria, near the Turkish border. It is home to a significant Assyrian Christian population, descendants of the ancient Mesopotamian Church. In 2004, Syria was already a pressure cooker of sectarian tension, though the full horror of civil war still lay years ahead. On the evening of November 22, 2004, something unprecedented began at the Church of the Virgin Mary in the Tel Nasri neighborhood. It started at approximately 9:00 p.m. A woman named Miriam Khalil was walking past the church when she noticed an unusual brightness emanating from the dome. Her first thought was that someone had installed new floodlights, but as she stopped to look more carefully, she realized the light was not coming from any fixture. It was emanating from a human form standing atop the church structure. The figure was female, draped in flowing robes that seemed to be made of pure luminescence. Miriam screamed, not in fear, but in recognition and joy. Within minutes, the narrow street filled with people. They poured from their homes, from nearby shops, from the church itself where evening prayers had just concluded. What they saw defied natural explanation. The figure was approximately 7 feet tall, larger than human scale but not grotesquely so. She wore robes that shifted between brilliant white and soft blue, colors that seemed to pulse with inner light. Her head was covered with a veil, and though her facial features were difficult to discern due to the radiance, witnesses consistently reported seeing a serene expression, eyes lowered in prayer or contemplation. Her hands were positioned in various gestures throughout the apparition, sometimes clasped in prayer, sometimes extended outward as if in blessing, sometimes holding what appeared to be an infant. But here is what separates this from mere legend or religious fantasy. The apparition did not last for seconds or minutes. It continued for hours. From 9:00 p.m. until nearly 2:00 a.m., the figure remained visible on the church dome. The crowd swelled to over 10,000 people. Among them were Muslim neighbors who came out of curiosity and stayed in wonder. Local police arrived to manage the crowd and became witnesses themselves. A Syrian military officer stationed in the area, Captain Youssef Hanna, later gave sworn testimony that he observed the phenomenon through military-grade binoculars and could detect no source of projection, no wires, no physical support for the figure. The apparition moved. This is crucial. She was not a static image. She walked along the dome's surface with fluid grace. She turned, presenting different angles to the crowd. When she turned her back, the folds of her robes were visible in three-dimensional detail. She raised her arms. She bowed toward the cross. At one point, she appeared to scatter something from her hands, and witnesses reported seeing what looked like falling stars or luminous particles descending toward the crowd, dissipating before reaching ground level. Then came the phenomenon that would be repeated in subsequent apparitions across the region. The sky above the church began to fill with lights. Witnesses described them as resembling doves, but they were quick to clarify these were not birds. They were forms of pure light, moving in coordinated patterns, executing turns and formations that no flock of birds could achieve, especially not at night. They moved at tremendous speed, then stopped instantly, hovering in place. They arranged themselves into crosses, into circles, into patterns that seemed almost choreographed, and they made no sound. The night was filled with the voices of the crowd, with prayers, with weeping, with exclamations of wonder, but the luminous forms moved in complete silence. At approximately 1:45 a.m., the figure raised both hands in a final blessing gesture. Then slowly she began to fade. Not suddenly, not like a switched-off light, but gradually as morning mist dissolves in sunlight. The luminous forms in the sky faded simultaneously. By 2:00 a.m., the dome stood dark and empty. But the crowd remained, many kneeling in the street, many weeping, many simply stunned into silence by what they had witnessed. The documentation and investigation. In 2004, digital cameras and mobile phones with cameras were becoming common, though not yet ubiquitous. Nevertheless, dozens of photographs and several video recordings were made that night. The quality varies, as one would expect from consumer-grade equipment in low-light conditions, but the images consistently show a luminous form on the church dome, clearly visible against the dark sky. In several photographs, the human-like shape is unmistakable, with the outline of a head, shoulders, and flowing robes clearly defined. The Syrian government, not known for promoting religious phenomena, sent investigators. They were looking for fraud, for some trick that could explain the event and allow them to dismiss it. They examined the church structure for hidden lights, projection equipment, or any technological apparatus. They found nothing. They interviewed witnesses separately, looking for contradictions in their accounts. The testimonies remained consistent. They consulted with professors of physics and optics from the University of Damascus, asking if any known atmospheric phenomenon could produce such an effect. The answer was no. The Assyrian Orthodox Church, to which the church belonged, also conducted an investigation. Bishop Mar Gregorios Yohanna established a commission of priests and laypeople to examine the event. They were cautious, even skeptical. The church has always been wary of false apparitions and the chaos they can cause. But after weeks of investigation, interviewing hundreds of witnesses, reviewing photographic evidence, and examining the site thoroughly, Bishop Gregorios issued a pastoral letter acknowledging that something extraordinary and unexplainable had occurred, that it bore the characteristics of a genuine supernatural manifestation, and that the faithful should receive it as a sign of heaven's concern for their suffering. The apparitions did not stop that first night. They continued intermittently over the following months. Sometimes the figure would appear for only a few minutes, other times for several hours. The crowds continued to gather. Christians came from across Syria and from neighboring countries, but remarkably, Muslims also came in large numbers. In the Middle East, Mary holds a unique position. She is revered in Islam as Maryam, the mother of the prophet Isa, Jesus. She is mentioned more times in the Quran than in the New Testament. She is considered the greatest woman who ever lived. So when word spread that Maryam was appearing in Kamishli, Muslims came to witness, and many testified to seeing the same phenomenon as their Christian neighbors. Aleppo, Syria, 2012. Apparitions amid apocalypse. Fast forward to 2012. Syria has descended into civil war. Aleppo, once one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities, a jewel of Islamic and Christian civilization, has become a battlefield. The ancient Christian quarter is under siege. Churches that stood for 1,500 years are being shelled. Families huddle in basements as bombs fall. Food is scarce. Water is scarce. Hope is scarcer still. In this hell on earth she came again. On the night of August 15th, the Feast of the Assumption, the Virgin Mary appeared over the Greek Orthodox Church of the Dormition in the Aziziye neighborhood of Aleppo. This area was on the front line between government and rebel forces. Snipers controlled the streets. Venturing outside after dark meant risking death. Yet witnesses emerged because the light was too brilliant to ignore. Father Elias Zalawi, the parish priest, was in the church basement with dozens of families sheltering from the bombardment. Someone rushed down the stairs shouting that there was a woman of light on the roof. Father Elias' first instinct was to prevent people from going outside into danger, but the light was streaming through the windows, bright enough to illuminate the basement. He went up, and what he saw made him forget the war for a moment. The figure stood on the church dome, but this time she was not alone. Beside her stood another luminous figure, smaller, clearly a child. The Virgin was holding the child's hand. They stood together, facing toward the Christian quarter, toward the areas of heaviest fighting. And then something happened that Father Elias describes as the most moving moment of his life. The figure of the Virgin raised her free hand and made a sweeping gesture over the neighborhood, as if spreading a protective covering over it. That night, despite heavy fighting all around, not a single shell fell on the Christian quarter. Not one. The surrounding areas were hit. Buildings 2 blocks away were destroyed, but the neighborhood under the Virgin's gaze remained untouched. This pattern repeated on several subsequent nights when she appeared. It became known among the residents as the miracle of protection. Families began to feel that no matter how close the war came, they were being shielded by an invisible hand. The apparitions in Aleppo were documented by multiple sources. A BBC news crew was in the city covering the conflict. When they heard reports of the apparition, they were skeptical, assuming it was war-induced hysteria. But their cameraman, a British atheist named David Morrison, filmed the phenomenon and later stated in an interview that he captured something on film that he could not explain. The footage shows a luminous form on the church dome, clearly visible, clearly humanoid in shape. Morrison stated, "I've filmed in war zones for 20 years. I've seen what fear and trauma can do to people's perceptions. This was not that. This was something physically present that the camera recorded." Sufini, Damascus, the weeping icons and the apparitions. While Aleppo burned in Damascus, another phenomenon was unfolding that would become connected to the apparitions. In the Sufini district of Damascus, in the home of a Christian family named Nasser, icons began to weep. This phenomenon had been occurring since 1982, but it intensified dramatically during the war years. The central icon, depicting the Virgin Mary, would spontaneously exude an oily substance from the area of the eyes. This substance was collected and analyzed by laboratories in France and Switzerland. The results showed it to be a form of olive oil, but with properties that could not be replicated synthetically. It appeared spontaneously, with no source, flowing from a flat painted surface. The quantity was substantial, sometimes filling small bottles over the course of hours. But in 2012, something new happened. On December 18th, Witnesses in the Natzer home reported that the icon began to glow with increasing intensity. Then, according to multiple testimonies, the two-dimensional image seemed to gain depth, and the figure of Mary appeared to move within the frame of the icon. Her eyes, which had been downcast, lifted and seemed to look directly at those present. Her hand, painted in a gesture of blessing, appeared to extend forward out of the plane of the icon. This lasted for approximately 10 minutes, witnessed by more than 30 people crowded into the small room. Among them was a Muslim physician, Dr. Kalo Mansur, who had come out of scientific curiosity to examine the weeping phenomenon. He later testified before a church commission that what he saw violated every principle of physics he understood. A flat image had acquired dimension and movement. He had no explanation. That same night, on the roof of the nearby Church of the Holy Cross, the Virgin appeared in her full luminous form. The two phenomena, the animated icon and the rooftop apparition, occurred simultaneously, witnessed by different groups of people in locations several blocks apart. When word spread and people rushed between the two sites, both phenomena were still occurring, visible to all. Lebanon, 2019. The apparitions of hope amid collapse. Lebanon, once called the Switzerland of the Middle East, has endured its own crucible of suffering. Civil war, foreign occupation, political corruption, economic collapse, and the catastrophic port explosion of 2020 that devastated Beirut. The Christian community of Lebanon, once a majority, has dwindled to perhaps 30% of the population, hemorrhaging immigrants who see no future in the country. In April 2019, before the worst of the economic collapse, apparitions began in the village of Magdush in southern Lebanon, site of an ancient shrine to Our Lady of Awaiting. This shrine commemorates the tradition that Mary waited in this location for Jesus when he visited the cities of Tyre and Sidon. The shrine sits on a hilltop with a commanding view of the Mediterranean Sea. On the evening of April 7th, a group of pilgrims visiting the shrine noticed unusual lights in the sky over the sea. At first, they thought it might be flares from Israeli military aircraft. The border is not far away and military activity is common, but the lights moved in ways that aircraft cannot. They hovered. They changed direction instantly. They pulsed with changing colors, white, blue, gold. Then, over the shrine itself, a figure materialized. She appeared gradually, first as a concentration of light, then taking on definite form. By now, the pattern was familiar to those who had heard of the Syrian apparitions. A woman in flowing robes, radiating light, her presence both gentle and overwhelming. She stood atop the shrine's tower, clearly visible against the darkening sky. Word spread with modern speed. Text messages, phone calls, social media posts. Within an hour, thousands of people were converging on Magdush. They came from Sidon, from Tyre, from villages throughout southern Lebanon. They climbed the hill to the shrine and they saw Christians, Muslims, Druze, people of all faiths and no faith. The figure remained visible for over 3 hours. What makes the Magdush apparitions particularly significant is the technological documentation. This was 2019. Nearly everyone had a smartphone with a high-quality camera. Hundreds of videos were recorded and posted online. Unlike grainy 1960s footage or low-resolution images from the early 2000s, these videos show in clear detail a luminous figure atop the shrine. The videos come from multiple angles, from people positioned in different locations around the site. They all show the same phenomenon. Skeptics have analyzed these videos, looking for evidence of projection, of digital manipulation, of any technological trickery. No convincing debunking has been produced. A particularly compelling piece of evidence comes from a video recorded by a Lebanese army officer who was off-duty and happened to be in the area. Major Anton Saad recorded a 12-minute video on his phone. As a military officer, he was trained in observation and threat assessment. His video is steady, well-framed, and includes his own commentary in Arabic. At one point, he zooms in on the figure and you can see, even in a smartphone video, the three-dimensional quality of the form, the way light and shadow play on the folds of the robes, the movement of the veil in a breeze that seems to affect only the apparition, not the surrounding trees. Major Saad later gave an interview to a Lebanese television station. He stated, "I am a military man. I am trained to be skeptical, to assess situations rationally. I went there expecting to find some explanation, some trick, but I saw something that has no rational explanation within our current understanding of physics. It was a physical presence of some kind, emitting its own light, moving with purpose. I don't know what it was, but I know what I saw, and my camera saw it too." The apparitions in Magdush continued intermittently throughout 2019 and into 2020. They became a source of hope for Lebanese people facing increasing desperation. As the economy collapsed, as banks froze accounts, as medicine became unavailable, as electricity failed, as the country seemed to be disintegrating, people would climb the hill to Magdush, hoping for another appearance, hoping for a sign that they were not forgotten. Egypt again, Asiyat, 2009-2018. While Zaytun remains the most famous of Egyptian apparitions, it was not the last. In the city of Asiyat in Upper Egypt, home to a large Coptic population, apparitions have occurred repeatedly over the past 15 years. The most significant series began in 2009 at the Church of the Virgin Mary and St. Abo Safin in the district of Dronka. Dronka is significant in Coptic tradition as one of the places where the Holy Family stayed during the flight into Egypt. A monastery has existed on this site since the 4th century, built into the cliffs overlooking the Nile. The modern church sits at the base of the cliff, beneath the ancient monastery. On August 17, 2009, the apparition began in a manner now familiar. A luminous figure appeared on the church dome at approximately 10:00 p.m. But the Asiyat apparitions had unique characteristics. The figure did not remain on the dome. She moved across the entire church complex, appearing on different domes, on the bell tower, on the walls. At times, she seemed to walk through the air itself, moving from one structure to another with no visible support. The apparitions in Asiyat were particularly frequent and prolonged. Over a 9-year period from 2009 to 2018, the Virgin appeared more than 300 times, sometimes multiple times in a single week. The crowds became a permanent feature. Every evening, thousands of people would gather, waiting, hoping, and more often than not she came. The Egyptian government, having learned from Zaytun, did not attempt to suppress or debunk the phenomenon. They provided security for the crowds and allowed the events to unfold. State television covered the apparitions, broadcasting footage that showed the luminous figure clearly. In a country where Coptic Christians faced ongoing persecution and terrorist attacks, the government seemed to recognize that the apparitions provided a release valve, a source of hope that kept people from despair. The miracles and healings. As in Zaytun, the Asiyat apparitions were accompanied by numerous reports of miraculous healings. A medical committee was established by the Coptic Orthodox Diocese of Asiyat to investigate and document these claims. Dr. Nabil Fahmy, a cardiologist and head of the committee, applied rigorous standards. Medical records before and after the claimed healing were required. Multiple physicians had to verify the diagnosis and the subsequent cure. Natural remission or misdiagnosis had to be ruled out. Over the 9 years of apparitions, the committee verified 47 cases as genuinely miraculous. These included cancers that disappeared overnight, paralysis reversed, blindness cured, deafness healed. One case involved a child born with severe cerebral palsy, unable to walk or speak at age 7. The parents brought him to Dronka during an apparition. According to their testimony and medical records, within days of that visit, the child began to show improvement. Within months, he was walking and speaking. His physicians at Cairo University Hospital had no medical explanation for the reversal of a condition that is considered permanent and irreversible. Another verified case involved a Muslim man from Asiyat named Hassan Ibrahim. He was suffering from end-stage liver failure due to hepatitis C. He was on the waiting list for a liver transplant, but given the shortage of organs in Egypt, his chances were slim. His Christian neighbor convinced him to go to Dronka during an apparition. Hassan went reluctantly, more to please his friend than from any expectation of healing. During the apparition, he felt an intense heat in his abdomen, so strong he thought he was having a heart attack. He collapsed and was taken to the hospital. Tests revealed that his liver function had dramatically improved. Further tests showed no trace of the hepatitis C virus. His doctors were baffled. Hassan Ibrahim converted to Christianity 6 months later, stating that he could not deny what had been done for him. The theological significance. Why is this happening? Why has the Virgin Mary chosen to appear so frequently and so publicly in the Middle East over the past 2 decades? Theologians and religious scholars have offered several interpretations. First, the Middle East is the birthplace of Christianity. It is where Christ walked, where the church was born, where the apostles preached and died. For 2,000 years, Christian communities have maintained a presence in these lands, often at great cost. Now these communities face extinction. The apparitions can be understood as heaven's refusal to allow this ancient witness to be extinguished without a fight. Mary comes to strengthen her children, to remind them they are not alone, to give them a reason to stay and to hope. Second, the Middle East is the epicenter of conflict between faiths and ideologies. It is where Christianity, Islam, and Judaism intersect and often collide. It is where secular modernity confronts ancient tradition. It is where the future of religious civilization may be decided. The apparitions, witnessed by people of all faiths, serve as a reminder that the supernatural is real, that materialism and violence are not the only forces at work in history, that heaven is watching and intervening. Third, Mary's appearances to both Christians and Muslims carry profound significance. In a region torn by sectarian hatred, where Christians and Muslims often view each other with suspicion or hostility, the Virgin appears to both, is recognized by both, and blesses both. This is a powerful statement of unity, a call to recognize common ground, to see each other as children of the same God. Many Muslim witnesses of these apparitions have reported a new respect for their Christian neighbors, a recognition that something holy is present in Christian sacred spaces. Fourth, the silence of the apparitions is significant. Unlike some apparitions in other parts of the world, where Mary delivers messages, warnings, or requests, in these Middle Eastern appearances she is almost entirely silent. She shows herself, she blesses, she radiates peace, but she does not speak. This silence is itself a message. In a region drowning in words, in propaganda, in ideological speeches, in religious argumentation, Mary offers presence instead of words. Her very existence, visible and undeniable, is the message. You are not alone, I am here. Hope. The skeptical objections and responses. Of course, skeptics have attempted to explain these phenomena through natural or psychological means. Let us examine the main objections and the responses. Objection 1. Mass hallucination. Groups of people can experience shared delusions, especially in religious contexts with high emotional intensity. Response: hallucinations are not photographed. They do not appear on video. They are not seen by people approaching from different directions who had no prior knowledge of what to expect. They do not last for hours. They do not occur repeatedly over years. The apparitions in question have been documented by cameras, seen by skeptics and believers alike, and witnessed by people who came looking for fraud. Objection 2. Projection technology. Someone is projecting an image onto the church domes using hidden projectors. Response: investigations at every site have searched exhaustively for projection equipment and found none. Moreover, projection requires a surface. The figure often appears to be three-dimensional, visible from multiple angles, moving in ways that a flat projection cannot. Projection also requires a light source. When authorities cut power to entire districts, as in Zaytun, the figure shone brighter, not dimmer. Modern holographic technology might theoretically create such an effect, but it requires massive equipment, power sources, and would be easily detected. No such equipment has ever been found. Objection 3. Natural atmospheric phenomena. Ball lightning, plasma formations, or other rare atmospheric effects could create luminous forms. Response: atmospheric phenomena do not take human shape, do not move with purpose, do not bow or bless, do not appear on schedule, and do not last for hours in the same location. They also do not appear exclusively over churches and religious sites while avoiding other buildings. Objection 4. Fraud for profit. Someone is creating these apparitions to attract pilgrims and donations. Response: who benefits? The sites of these apparitions are often in war zones or areas of extreme poverty. There is no tourism infrastructure to profit from pilgrims. The churches involved have not become wealthy. Many have been damaged or destroyed in subsequent fighting. If this were fraud, it would be the most elaborate, expensive, and least profitable hoax in history, maintained across multiple countries, multiple denominations, and decades. The fruits and the impact. Jesus said, "By their fruits you shall know them." What have been the fruits of these apparitions? First, conversions. Thousands of people, Muslims and atheists particularly, have converted to Christianity after witnessing these events. They have done so in countries where conversion from Islam can mean death, where atheism is the safe and socially acceptable position. These are not casual conversions. They are life-altering decisions made at great personal cost. Second, perseverance. Christian communities that were on the verge of complete exodus have found reason to stay. After the apparitions in Aleppo, many families who had plans to flee Syria decided to remain, believing they were under divine protection. Some of those families are still there, maintaining Christian presence in a city that was nearly destroyed. Third, unity. In multiple locations, Muslims and Christians have reported improved relationships after jointly witnessing these apparitions. Shared awe at the supernatural has a way of making human divisions seem petty. There are documented cases of Muslim families protecting Christian neighbors during attacks, citing the apparitions as the reason. "How can we harm those whom Maryam visits?" one man said. Fourth, healings. Beyond the physical healings, there have been countless reports of psychological and spiritual healings. People suffering from depression, trauma, and despair have found hope. In a region where suicide rates have climbed and where many young people see no future, the apparitions have provided a reason to continue living. The ongoing nature. Unlike many historical apparitions that occurred in a specific time and place and then ended, these Middle Eastern apparitions continue. As recently as last year, reports have emerged from Iraq, from Egypt, from Lebanon. The phenomenon is not concluded. Heaven, it seems, is not finished speaking to the Middle East. This ongoing nature makes these events unique in the history of Marian apparitions. We are not looking back at something that happened long ago. We are witnessing something that is still unfolding, still developing, still producing fruits and evidence. What this means for us. You might be reading this from the comfort and safety of the Western world, far from the war zones and persecution of the Middle East. You might wonder what these apparitions have to do with you. Everything. These events are a reminder that we live in a universe where the supernatural is real, where heaven observes and intervenes, where suffering is seen and answered. In the West, we have largely embraced a functional atheism, living as if God were absent or irrelevant, as if this material world were all that exists. The Middle Eastern apparitions are a direct challenge to that worldview. They say, "Wake up. There is more. You are not alone." History is not just the collision of human wills and natural forces. There is a divine will at work, and it is oriented toward love, toward redemption, toward hope. These apparitions also remind us of our responsibility toward our persecuted brothers and sisters. While Mary appears to comfort them, we are called to support them materially and politically. We cannot simply marvel at the supernatural events and ignore the very real human suffering that occasioned them. The Virgin appears to give hope, but she also, by her presence, draws attention to those who suffer. She makes their plight visible. We are called to respond. Finally, these apparitions are a call to faith in an age of skepticism. We live in a time when belief is considered naive, when religious faith is dismissed as psychological weakness or cultural conditioning. The Middle Eastern apparitions stand as objective evidence that faith is not delusion. Hundreds of thousands of people, including skeptics, scientists, and hostile witnesses, have seen something that cannot be explained by current scientific understanding. This does not prove every religious claim, but it does prove that the materialist worldview is incomplete. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy. A closing reflection. On a warm evening in Damascus, while bombs fell in the distance, a Muslim shopkeeper named Ahmed stood in a crowd outside a church. He had come out of curiosity, half expecting to find foolish Christians worshipping shadows. Instead, he saw a woman made of light standing on the church dome, her hands extended in blessing over a neighborhood that had known only violence for years. Ahmed wept. He did not convert that night. He did not become a Christian. But he went home and told his children, there is something more than what we see. There is something watching over us. Even here, even now, we are not forgotten. In a world that often feels abandoned by heaven, that is a message worth hearing. That is a sign of hope. The Virgin Mary's latest appearances in the Middle East tell us that no matter how dark the night, light can break through. No matter how desperate the situation, hope can be born. No matter how alone we feel, we are seen, we are loved, and we are not forsaken. May we have eyes to see and hearts to believe.